After the divorce, my ex-husband left me with nothing. No house, no savings, just memories I wish I could erase. So I took the only job I could find, waiting tables at a hotel restaurant. But yesterday, something happened that changed everything. A quick little note before I go on: if you love emotional, real, heart-touching stories like this, please consider subscribing to Her Stories Vault. It helps more than you know. Now let me tell you what happened. A billionaire guest walked in. Tall, confident. The kind of man people whisper about the moment he steps through the door. When he reached for the menu, I noticed something on his wrist, a birthmark. A small crescent shape, the same one I have. My heart stopped. I asked his name just to be sure. He said, Ethan James Morgan. And in that instant the floor vanished beneath my feet. Ethan. The same name as the baby I lost 30 years ago. The Windsor Hotel doesn't usually hire women my age to serve their elite guests. They prefer the young, the ones with bright smiles and spotless pasts. But I had one thing they couldn't ignore, a last name that still carried weight in the city. Reeves, former Mrs. Jonathan Reeves, ex-wife of one of the city's most powerful attorneys. So yes, they made an exception. Even for a 52-year-old woman with silver strands where auburn used to be, and lines around my eyes that tell stories of laughter, tears, and everything between. For 5 years, I've served drinks to the same people who once dined at my table. Most pretend not to recognize me. The few who do offer pitying smiles, the kind that sting worse than judgment. Olivia, you're on the VIP section tonight, Diana, my floor manager, said as I clocked in. Mr. Morgan's in the penthouse. He doesn't usually dine downstairs, but when he does, everything has to be perfect. I nodded, keeping my face calm. Inside, I just wanted to get through another shift. Everyone knew the name, Ethan Morgan, billionaire, tech genius. The kind of man who owns more companies than I can count. But knowing of someone isn't the same as knowing them. At exactly 8 o'clock he arrived. Alone, no entourage, no noise, just quiet confidence wrapped in a dark suit. He looked younger than I expected, early 30s maybe. Good evening, sir, I said. Would you like to see our wine list? Water, please, still, and the chef's tasting menu, he replied, polite but firm. As he reached for the menu, his sleeve slipped just enough for me to see it again. That mark, that tiny crescent. My breath faltered, the same one I have, the same one my baby boy had when he was born and died hours later. The bottle almost slipped from my hand. He looked up. Are you okay? Yes, sir, I managed. I'm fine, but I wasn't fine. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I kept glancing at him throughout the dinner. The more I looked, the harder it became to breathe. He had my eyes, blue-gray that catches silver in the light. And his chin, Jonathan's chin, the same small cleft. Even the way he held his fork, precise, deliberate, was the same. No, it couldn't be. My son had died. I'd held him. I'd watched his tiny chest stop moving. He'd been buried in a cemetery I wasn't even allowed to visit after the divorce. But the timing, the age, the birthmark, all of it lined up too perfectly. When he finished his meal, I couldn't hold the question in anymore. Forgive me, sir, I asked softly, but may I ask your full name? He gave a faint smile, amused. You're serving me dinner and you don't know who I am. Your full name, I clarified. Ethan James Morgan. Ethan. The name carved on a tiny gravestone with flowers I brought year after year. My knees weakened. Thank you, sir, I whispered, and stepped away before he saw the truth in my face. In the kitchen, I leaned against the wall, fighting for breath. This had to be a coincidence, right? But when I returned with his coffee, I saw him rub that birthmark, the same way I do when I'm deep in thought. The exact same unconscious habit. Will there be anything else, Mr. Morgan? I asked, trying to stay composed. He studied me. Have we met? You seem familiar. I don't believe so, I said carefully. I've been at the Windsor for 5 years. Before that, I was married to Jonathan Reeves. His expression shifted. Reeves, as in Harrington and Reeves? Yes, I said. You know him, by reputation, he replied, his voice cooling. Thank you for your excellent service tonight, Mrs. Reeves. When I turned away, I felt his eyes follow me. When I glanced back, he was staring at his wrist, then at me. Confused, curious. That night, sleep never came. I stared at the small memory box I've kept hidden for decades, my baby's hospital bracelet, a lock of soft dark hair, a single photograph. And there it was again, that same crescent on my son's wrist, the same one on Ethan Morgan's, the same one on mine. Tomorrow he would check out. Tomorrow I might lose him again. And this time I wouldn't survive losing him twice. I arrived at the hotel 3 hours early the next morning, still replaying every second of the night before. I'd practiced what I might say if I saw him again, and every version scared me. Diana walked in, eyebrows raised. Olivia, you're early, you okay? I couldn't sleep, I said. Thought I'd get a head start, she shrugged. Mr. Morgan requested breakfast in his suite, specifically asked for you. My heart skipped. Did he say why? No. Just keep it professional, okay? I nodded and wheeled the breakfast cart toward the penthouse. And in my pocket, the tiny hospital photograph burned against my leg, like a secret that could either heal me or destroy me. He opened the door already dressed, perfectly put together, like he'd been awake since dawn. Miss Reeves, he said, stepping aside politely. Thank you for coming up yourself. Of course, I whispered. I rolled the cart in and set everything by the window overlooking the morning skyline. The sunlight turned the glass towers gold. Will there be anything else, sir? I asked. Yes, he said simply. Join me? For a second, I wondered if I misheard him. I beg your pardon, he gestured to the chair across from him. Please, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Every hotel rule I'd ever learned screamed no, never sit with a guest. But curiosity had already pushed me past that line last night. So I sat, carefully, just the edge of the chair. I rarely forget a face, he began, watching me closely. Last night I couldn't place you. But this morning, he paused, then turned his phone toward me. A photograph filled the screen. A society page from 20 years ago. Jonathan and me at a charity gala, me in pearls and a smile that hid how much I was already breaking. You were a pianist, Ethan said quietly, before you married Jonathan Reeves. A lifetime ago, I replied. He nodded slowly. Last night you noticed my birthmark. My breath caught. He wasn't guessing, he knew. He glanced at my wrist just as my sleeve slid up an inch. A crescent moon, he said softly. Not common. Less than 1% of people have distinct-shaped birthmarks like that. My pulse hammered. He leaned forward slightly. You asked my name like it mattered. You watched me during dinner, and now I learn your ex-husband's firm has been aggressively pursuing my business. His eyes narrowed. So tell me the truth, Miss Reeves. Why were you so interested? The safe option was a lie, an apology, retreating behind professionalism, but the truth had already clawed its way up. With trembling hands, I reached into my pocket and slid the photograph toward him. This is why. He picked it up and studied the faded hospital picture of a newborn, small, fragile, a little crescent on his wrist. I don't understand, he whispered. My son, I said, born prematurely, 30 years ago. They told me he lived only a few hours. His name was Ethan, Ethan Jonathan Reeves. He stared at me, stunned. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I was born to Helen and James Morgan, he said tightly. I've seen my birth certificate. What's your birthday? I whispered. April 14th. My breath cracked. My son was born on April 14th, 1995. He sank into his chair as if the ground shifted beneath him. This is impossible, he murmured. Yes, I said softly. And yet here we are. We sat there in a silence that held 30 years of questions. He finally looked up. Who delivered your baby? Dr. Sarah Winters, I said. University Medical Center, he blinked. Helen, my mother, worked there. She knew a Dr. Winters. The memory hit me hard, the fluorescent lights. The cold voice telling me he didn't survive. Helen's face leaning over me afterward. Her hand on my shoulder, too kind, too rehearsed. Jonathan never wanted children, I whispered. When I got pregnant, he was furious. And when the baby came early, he didn't want to try. Ethan rubbed his forehead, frustration tightening his jaw. I need to verify all this, he said quietly. Medical records, DNA testing, something, if what you're saying is true. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said. I don't want anything from you. I just needed to know if it was possible. He softened then just a little. What did they tell you back then? That he was too premature, that his lungs weren't developed. They said he died in my arms, but it's all a blur. I was drugged, my voice broke. I've lived with that funeral my entire life. For a moment, I saw empathy flicker in his eyes. I have meetings, he said finally. But I'll be in the city tonight. We'll talk again. As I reached the door, he said quietly, Olivia, don't tell anyone, not yet. I won't, I promised. The elevator doors closed, and I let my forehead rest against the cool metal. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Had I just turned a billionaire's world upside down, or uncovered the truth I'd buried for decades? Hours passed in a fog. I moved through the hotel on autopilot, my mind somewhere else entirely. During my break, I searched the name Helen Morgan obstetrician. A flood of articles appeared, old medical journal photos, awards, smiles that looked genuine until you knew what hid beneath. I stared at her picture, wondering how a woman who saved so many babies could have taken mine. My break ended too quickly. When I stepped out of the elevator, I almost collided with a tall man in a gray suit. "Excuse me," I said automatically. He turned and the world stopped. Jonathan, 20 years of marriage, 5 years of silence. And suddenly, he was standing in front of me as polished and self-assured as ever. "Olivia," he said, eyes scanning my uniform with familiar judgment. "I didn't know you worked here." "There's a lot you don't know about my life now," I replied, refusing to shrink the way I used to. He smiled faintly. "I just had a meeting with Ethan Morgan, trying to bring him on as a client. Huge opportunity." My stomach twisted. "You sat across from your own son and felt nothing. Nothing at all." "Well," I said, glancing at the time. "Good luck, you look well," he added softly, fake softly. Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving that old cologne and all those old questions behind him. The rest of the evening blurred. When I finally clocked out, the city air felt cold and sharp against my skin. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Park, Boat Basin Cafe. 1 hour, Ethan." I arrived to find him already seated, dressed casually, almost unrecognizable from the man in a penthouse suit. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "I thought a public place might make this easier." "Did you meet Jonathan today?" I asked. His eyebrows rose. "How did you?" "I ran into him," I said. "He mentioned you." Ethan leaned back, bitterness tightening his expression. "He didn't recognize me. He sat there pitching his firm like it was any other meeting." "That sounds exactly like him," I whispered. "Tell me about him," Ethan said gently. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the 21-year-old pianist with stars in her eyes, the charming attorney who swept me off my feet, the marriage that turned into a cage, the pregnancy he didn't want, the night at 26 weeks, bright lights, fear, and a tiny cry I still hear in my dreams. "You had this same birthmark," I whispered, touching my wrist. "That's the last thing I remember before they told me you were gone." He listened, jaw tight. Then he pulled out his phone. "There's something you need to see." A photograph of a handwritten journal entry filled the screen, Helen Morgan's handwriting. "The mother believes he didn't survive. A necessary deception. The child will have a better life with us." My hand flew to my mouth. "Oh my God, there's more," Ethan said. "She wrote that Jonathan paid her. He called it research funding." "He paid her," I whispered, "to steal my baby." "I'm getting a DNA test," he said softly. "But honestly, I already know." We sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the river. "What happens now?" I whispered. He looked at me with eyes that held both strength and sorrow. "Now," he said, "we find the full truth. And then, we decide how Jonathan Reeves answers for what he's done." And for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, the world looked like autumn had been painted just for us, red, gold, and orange stretching along the Hudson Valley. Ethan drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, checking the mirrors like clockwork. Neither of us spoke much. We were both preparing for the truth waiting at the end of the road. The assisted living facility smelled like lavender and disinfectant. The director met us at the entrance. "She's having a good day," he said. "Relatively lucid." Ethan looked at me. "Ready?" "No," but I nodded anyway. A nurse led us to a sunroom where an elderly woman sat staring into the garden, her white hair neatly tied back. Frail, but not fragile. There was something still sharp about her posture. "Dr. Winters," the attendant said gently, "you have visitors." She turned, confusion flickering in her faded blue eyes. "Hello," she said softly. "Do I know you?" Ethan stepped forward. "My name is Ethan Morgan, and this is Olivia Reeves. We want to ask about a case from 1995. She blinked, her gaze drifting. "So many babies," she murmured. "So many mothers. They all blur together." I moved closer, my pulse pounding. "Do you remember me, Dr. Winters? Olivia Reeves. You delivered my son, the one you told me didn't survive." Something in her face stiffened. Her eyes darted to Ethan. Panic cracked through the fog. Ethan rolled up his sleeve and showed her the crescent birthmark. "You remember this, don't you?" Her lips trembled, her hands shook harder. "Helen is she," she whispered. "She passed last year," Ethan replied quietly. "But she left journals, detailed ones." A slow, painful clarity settled into the doctor's eyes. The fog cleared. Shame sharpened her expression. "It wasn't just theft," she said finally. Then explain it, I whispered. She swallowed, her voice trembling. Your husband approached me first, weeks before the birth. He knew it was a high-risk pregnancy. He said he was exploring options. Options? I repeated, horror rising. He didn't want a premature child, she said. He worried about complications, disabilities. I told him many preemies grow up healthy, but he wouldn't listen. She hesitated, then added, that's when he mentioned Helen Morgan. She had just lost a pregnancy. She and her husband wanted a baby more than anything. He said it would benefit everyone. Ethan's voice hardened. Everyone except my real mother. He was persuasive, she said weakly. He knew about a malpractice case from my past, a mistake I made years earlier. He threatened to expose it. I thought if I agreed, I could protect my career. I stared at her. You chose your career over my child. She winced. I chose what seemed best at the time. You were so young. Jonathan said you were overwhelmed, unprepared. Helen could give the baby opportunities you couldn't. My eyes burned. You had no right to decide that. She nodded, eyes filling. You're right, I had no right. What happened that night? Ethan asked, voice steady. She looked at her hands. When you were born tiny but breathing, I knew you might survive with proper care, but the plan was already in motion. Jonathan told Helen you'd been abandoned. Helen told James she delivered early while traveling. Falsified records were prepared. My voice cracked. Then who did I hold? Her answer dropped like a stone. A stillborn, she whispered. From earlier that day, the parents didn't want to see the body, so we repurposed it. My knees buckled. I grabbed the windowsill. My chest clenched like it would tear open. Ethan stepped closer to steady me. Dr. Winters continued quietly. Within hours, we learned Ethan was perfectly healthy, but it was too late. The Morgans had taken him home. Jonathan had told you what he wanted you to believe. I forced myself to speak. Did you ever try to tell me later, even once? Her voice broke. Once, a year later, at a fundraiser, you looked hollow. I wanted to tell you everything, but Jonathan was watching. He made it clear if the truth ever surfaced, he would ruin my life. Ethan's jaw clenched. You let her bury an empty casket. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I have lived with that guilt every day for 30 years. We left the facility without another word. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper, almost cutting. Back in the car, Ethan drove in silence for several minutes, trees blurring past the windows. She confirmed everything, he said finally. Jonathan planned all of it. Yes, I whispered. Now we know exactly what we're walking into. He tightened his grip on the wheel. Tomorrow, we confront him. The word hung in the air like a warning bell. Tomorrow. The next 2 days stretched like a thin wire. I took time off from the hotel. Ethan called every night, not just with updates, but with quiet conversations that filled spaces 30 years wide. We discovered small things we shared. The same love of classical music. The same habit of reading late into the night. The same need for silence when the world felt too loud. But beneath every conversation lived one truth. Jonathan Reeves would not surrender easily. On the morning of the deadline, a courier arrived at Ethan's apartment with a heavy envelope. Ethan opened it slowly, his expression unreadable, then handed me the papers. Inside was a notarized confession. Jonathan's handwriting, sharp, deliberate, spelled out the entire scheme. His conversations with Helen Morgan, his blackmail of Dr. Winters, the falsified records, the staged death, the cover-up. He acknowledged Ethan as his biological son. He offered a formal apology. He surrendered his ownership stake in Harrington and Reeves to a new foundation. Our foundation. On the last page was a note clipped to the corner. I expect complete confidentiality. What's done is done. JR no request to see his son, no explanation, no desire for redemption, just a man ending a transaction. Always business, I murmured. Ethan watched my face. Does this help? He asked quietly. It doesn't fix 30 years, I said, but it gives us the truth and a way to move forward. He nodded. Then we build. My apartment felt small as he stepped inside for the first time. Sunlight warmed the old wooden floors. My upright piano, my last gift to myself, sat against the far wall, clean and waiting. It's not much, I said softly. He walked straight to the piano, brushing a key with his fingertips. Helen forced me into lessons, he said with a faint smile. I have perfect pitch. I blinked. Do you? He tapped another key. Will you play something? I sat at the bench. My fingers trembled for a moment, then found the familiar shape of music. The notes of Claire de Lune filled the room, gentle, rippling light in the quiet. When the piece ended, Ethan exhaled slowly. You could still do this, he said. Perform, teach, start over if you want to. His voice carried no pressure, only belief. I swallowed hard. Maybe one day. He walked to the bookshelf, pausing at a framed ultrasound. Is this me? He asked softly. 24 weeks, I whispered. The last image I had. I'd like a copy. Of course. He nodded, absorbing every detail of a life he never had the chance to know. Then he sat beside me. There's more we need to address, he said. Jonathan's firm, the corruption, everything he's been hiding. He opened a folder, emails, financial transfers, sealed court documents. His entire empire is built on unethical dealings, Ethan said. If this goes public, it could ruin dozens of lives, not just his. Then what do you want to do? I asked. We don't need revenge, he said quietly. We need accountability and closure. He looked at me then, really looked. You've carried enough pain for a lifetime. Let's end this the right way. I nodded. Together. That word felt new, warm, solid, together. Weeks moved quickly after that. The Reeves Foundation for Family Justice came to life, our mission to help families torn apart by deceit or coercion. We offered legal support, therapy, grants for reunification. We asked Diana to become executive director. She said yes with tears in her eyes. I resigned from the Windsor. Most people assumed I'd moved on to a nonprofit. Only Diana knew the truth. You deserve this, she whispered, hugging me, every bit of it. Jonathan kept his promise. He vanished quietly, no press conferences, no excuses. Just a short announcement about health concerns and early retirement. I felt no triumph. Only the soft settling of balance, finally returned. Ethan and I built a rhythm, dinners together, long walks, quiet afternoons planning foundation programs. The awkwardness faded. Something steady, something real grew in its place. One evening, Ethan set down his wine glass and said, There's a board retreat next month. Tuscany, I want you to come. Tuscany, I laughed softly. With your board, not with them, he said. Beside them, there's an antique piano in the villa, and I want you there. I hesitated. What will you tell them about me? The truth, he said simply. That you're my mother. I don't want to hide it anymore. Emotion tightened my throat. Are you sure? He nodded. Helen raised me and I'll always honor that, but you are my mother too by blood and now by choice. My eyes burned. Then I'd be honored to come, I said. The villa in Tuscany was something out of a painting. Stone walls, cypress trees, and golden vines stretching toward forever. Ethan guided me through the gardens on our first night, showing me the room with the antique grand piano. You'll love it here, he said softly. And he was right. The air smelled of lavender and sunlight. The nights were quiet, peaceful. On the second night, I sat at the piano, letting my fingers drift over old Schubert lines I hadn't played in years. Ethan leaned against the doorway. The board keeps asking about you, he said. They're intrigued by the mysterious pianist who seems to know me better than anyone. I laughed softly. Hardly mysterious. He smiled. I'd like to introduce you properly tonight, if you're comfortable. I'm ready, I said. The terrace filled with lantern light and soft conversation. Ethan rested a hand gently at my elbow. I'd like you all to meet someone important, he said. This is my mother, Olivia Reeves. A quiet ripple moved through the group, surprise, recognition, warmth. Later, under the moonlit garden paths, Ethan walked beside me. Thank you for letting me introduce you that way, he said. Thank you, I whispered, for claiming me. He stopped near a stone railing. The valley glowed silver beneath us. Can I ask you something? He said. Anything? Tell me the story of the day I was born, the beginning, what you hoped for me. I took a breath and the memories flowed. You were impatient, I said. I was at the piano Moonlight Sonata when the first contraction made me miss a note. They rushed me to the hospital. I was terrified, but also certain. When they placed you in my arms, you were tiny, but your little hand gripped my finger like you were claiming your place in the world. And when I saw the crescent on your wrist, the twin of mine, I knew you were mine, completely. He listened like he was hearing his own origin for the first time. Thank you, he whispered. The words carried 30 years of longing. Autumn returned by the time we flew home. The foundation grew. My music returned in smaller, gentler ways, masterclasses, small recitals. I didn't need fame. I just needed purpose. Ethan introduced me as his mother to the people who mattered. We kept boundaries clear in public and built something warm in private. Jonathan disappeared to a quiet home in Connecticut. I didn't hate him. I didn't forgive him. I simply stopped carrying him. One crisp October morning, Ethan called. Are you busy this afternoon? No, I said. Why? There's somewhere we need to go. He drove us to Riverside Cemetery. Leaves drifted like burning embers across the gravel. We found the gravestone under a maple tree. ETHAN Jonathan Reves, beloved son April 14, 1995, a grave for a child who never died. Tended by a mother who mourned an empty space. Ethan placed a smooth white stone on top. Helen was Jewish, he said softly. She taught me this, I blinked. I used to bring blue irises, even in winter. He took my hand, warm. Steady, I'm sorry you carried this alone. I'm not carrying it anymore, I realized. For the first time in 30 years, I'm not grieving. He looked at the stone. What happens to it now? It stays, I said. Not for death, but as a marker of where everything truly began. On the drive back, he nodded toward the glove compartment. I have something for you. Inside was a blue envelope, heavy, elegant. Phoenix Tech, in collaboration with the Reeves Foundation for Family Justice, requests the honor of your presence at the dedication of the Helen Morgan Memorial Wing University Children's Hospital, November 15th, 7 p.m. I looked up stunned. It'll focus on neonatal care, he said gently. Research, support for families, everything Helen spent her life working for. My chest tightened. It's beautiful. She would have been proud. I wanted to be sure you were comfortable with it. Helen made a terrible choice, I said softly, but she also gave you a home full of love. Life isn't neat. People just do the best they can. He smiled, a little relieved. I hoped you'd say that. At a red light, he turned to me. The dedication is on the anniversary of the day we met. I hoped you might play something. I felt warmth bloom in my chest. I'd be honored, I said. The day of the dedication arrived quietly, with a sky washed in pale winter light. The hospital atrium glowed under a ceiling of glass panels, each one catching the early evening sun like pieces of amber. Guests filled the space slowly, doctors, donors, board members, families whose lives had been changed by neonatal care. Ethan stood near the entrance, speaking with quiet authority. He wasn't the billionaire on magazine covers tonight. He wasn't the CEO walking into board meetings. He was simply a man honoring the woman who raised him and the truth that brought us back together. He caught my eye and walked over. You look beautiful, he said softly. I smoothed the silver bracelet he'd given me, the little crescent moon charm resting against my wrist. I'm proud of you, I said. He nodded once, emotion flickering in his eyes. They're about to start. A soft bell chimed. The room hushed. A podium stood beneath a banner. The Helen Morgan Memorial Wing Neonatal Intensive Care and Family Support Center. Ethan stepped forward, and his voice carried through the quiet like a steady, warm note. Tonight, he said, we honor someone who dedicated her life to giving fragile beginnings a fighting chance. Helen Morgan was more than a doctor. She was a woman who believed in the power of second chances, in the resilience of the smallest lives, and in the families who fight for them. He paused, just long enough for breath, not suspense. My own life began under uncertain odds, he continued. And I survived because of people like her. With this wing, we hope to give that same chance to every child who needs it. The audience listened with softened faces. His words weren't dramatic, they were true. And truth, spoken gently, can move mountains. When he finished, polite applause rose through the atrium. Then he turned toward me. Now, he said, I'd like to invite someone very dear to me to share a piece of music. Someone whose strength, grace, and resilience have shaped my life more than she knows. His eyes found mine. My mother, Olivia Reeves. A breath caught in my chest. Not because he said the word mother, we had crossed that bridge long ago, but because he said it here in front of everyone, without hesitation, without fear. The piano waited beneath soft lights. I walked toward it, my steps steady. I sat on the bench and let my fingers rest on the keys. Then, slowly, I began to play Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. A piece full of light. A piece you choose when you want hope to fill the room. Each note rose gently, like warm air lifting from a candle. The music reached the far corners of the atrium, softening the white walls, settling deep into the hearts listening. I played for Helen, for Ethan, for the baby I held for only a moment, and the son I found again. And I played for myself, for the woman I lost along the way, and the one I became when the truth finally came home. When the last note faded, a hush lingered. Then applause rose, not loud but warm, the kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket. Ethan met me at the steps. That was beautiful, he whispered. Thank you, I said. For believing in me, he smiled. Always. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the world outside turned quiet, we drove to my apartment. Snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, like the sky was exhaling everything it had held all day. Inside, I made tea, peppermint for me, chamomile for him. We sat at my small kitchen table, listening to the faint hum of the heater and the whisper of snow against the window. Ethan picked up his mug. I was thinking, he said carefully, about the foundation. We're helping families locally, but we could expand. Europe, Asia, places where neonatal care is underfunded. I'd like that, I said. A lot, he smiled, relieved. Good. Because there's so much good we can do, together. I studied him, this man with my eyes and Helen's heart, a child stolen from my arms. A son returned to me by truth and courage and an impossible chance. I'm proud of you, I whispered. He looked down, almost shy. I'm proud of us. Outside, snow kept falling, soft, silver, endless. A quiet world made new again. We talked about the future, programs we wanted to build, families we wanted to help, the places we wanted to see. He told me stories of his childhood, the little moments he was finally comfortable sharing. I told him stories of mine, of music halls, conservatory friends, the dreams I once had, and the dreams I was building now. Somewhere between those conversations, I realized something. I had lost 30 years, but I had gained something just as powerful. A second chance. A new story, a life rebuilt. I had found my son. And somewhere in the quiet, between warm tea and falling snow, I understood that we were not defined by what was taken from us, but by what we chose to build next. Together.